Hi, everyone. My name is Marton Robinson. I'm a Black person, Black guy with a black t-shirt and a white hat. Um, I'm here with Astrid and Paula. Sadly, we have an artist that couldn't. He's sick right now. Jogesh. He's sick and he can join us in the conversation. So we're gonna try to keep the conversation center in, let's say, at the Jala or what we call America. And yeah, so I want to introduce Paula.
Mari Compute, hello everyone. My name is Paula Baeza Pailamilla. I'm a brown person. I have my hair cut short. I'm using glasses and I wear a pink t-shirt. Yeah, and I am now in Zurich. I come from Chile, Santiago de Chile, but I am living now in Switzerland 1 year ago. And I'm an artist. I work with performance and pink video art and also textile. And yeah, we'll pass to Astrid.
Hola a todas, a todos. Yo soy Astrid, soy una mujer negra con una camisa blanca y en una habitación con unas luces de Navidad en el fondo.
Thank you. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Astrid. I'm a Black woman. I'm in a white shirt, and I'm in a room lit by Christmas lights.
Okay. Thank you. And so this conversation is centered around the idea of identity, and maybe we're gonna start it with a question. Like the three of us work in different locations, and well, I'm in Toronto, and each one of us somehow share this idea of identity and how we represent ourselves from a different location. So we could start it, and I want to ask both of you, like, how you define yourself within another context that is not your own country or your own community, and how you define your practice within those ideas. Astrid, Paula.
Como quieras, Paula. Ok, bueno, yo soy de Medellín, Colombia, pero mi familia es del Pacífico colombiano, que es el territorio con mayor población afrodescendiente en el país. Y el haber nacido y crecido en esta ciudad que tiene unos imaginarios coloniales y del sicariato y narco, en donde la participación de las personas afrodescendientes en la construcción de historia y región siempre ha habitado los escenarios de la estereotipación o la invisibilización, y desde hace poco tiempo recién como que se ha hecho más visible desde las mismas comunidades afrodescendientes que habitamos esta región, pues la participación de nosotros en la construcción de este territorio. Entonces, pues el haber nacido aquí y con familia de este territorio del Pacífico, pues me ha hecho a mí la noción, pensar en la noción de identidad como un espacio de constante confrontación o de preguntas más que de aciertos, ¿no? Y en esas preguntas es en donde yo encuentro como los códigos para sentirme relacionada con otras personas que están en esas mismas búsquedas que yo. Entonces, dentro del país siento eso, pero al haber sido migrante de Chile durante 5 años en un territorio en donde recién en el 2019 se reconoce a la población, legalmente se reconoce a la población afrochilena, pues también eso atraviesa otras dinámicas en cómo situarme y saberme dentro de ese lugar.
I was born in Medellin, but my family was born. My family comes from the Pacific Colombia, where most of the Black population in Colombia lives. I was born here in Medellin, with a city with a big colonial heritage. There's the narco imaginary, Killman imaginary, where Black people are stereotyped and we're sort of erased from the construction of the city. But having been born here with my family in the Pacific Colombia, I've lived this space. I've constructed my identity through mostly confrontation and mostly questions, more than knowing exactly. And I think through questioning, I've created my own code, and I have understood other people in this same search. That's what happened to be inside my own country. But having lived in Chile, it was different. Chile only in 2019 legalized or legally accepted the presence of African Chilean people, and through that dynamic, I understood a different situation in that place.
Paula?
Yeah, in my case, I come from Mapuche family, and yeah, I am in the second generation who was born in the city in Santiago, and it's in the context of Chile, and the relation with the Mapuche people is not too easy. This kind of background, because in general, people think that Mapuche people just live in the countryside or in nature, and this kind of identities in the case of indigenous people who born in cities, in the urban context, sometimes are how you say, people put some like finger on there, ¿cómo se dice? Como señalar. And yeah, so I grew up in Santiago in this kind of history and context. My own identity is a big issue in my life, I think, and some works in my creative work, I take some kind of memories of my family and my memories of my own life, living in this contradiction in a way, because sometimes you don't feel like enough Mapuche or enough Chilean, or because we lost our languages, like our traditional languages. And my native language is Spanish, which is a colonial language. So that is a contradiction in my own body, in my own history. So yeah, I grew up with all of these questions and contradictions and difficult things in my life. And in the end, when I found some kind of acceptation, like when I finally found a kind of identity with these contradictions, like accepted, I decided to move to Switzerland for different reasons. And now I am not a Mapuche anymore, because here I am just a Latin American migrant person. So all this construction that I made in Chile in my process in years in my life, for years, now is totally different. And yeah, I'm a very new in this migration situation. I just arrived here 1 year ago, a bit more. And last year, I remember it was super hard to me, like who I am here now. I am Mapuche, I am an indigenous person, I am a migrant, I am a Latin American person. So that kind of things of people think about me, about my identity, about my origins, because here all the people are asking all the time, where are you from? Do you speak German? Do you speak Spanish? What is your background? Where you born? It's super like you have to be super available to share your characteristics or identities, elements, and that is super uncomfortable, but at the same time it's super interesting because you can understand your context, but also your own way through this new context, this new territory, these new questions that are apareciendo. Yeah, I think that is in a general thought.
That's the second time I do that today. So, so you both talk about these ideas of questioning question that comes through the body being present in a different location, or the body being dislocated, right? And then those questions start being more vivid, and it's hard because whenever someone asks you where you're from, you already know that they have some sort of perception that you're the other. Right. So how you answer to a question in which there is already a perception of you being an other. And not only that, right? You talk about this idea of authenticity, right? How authentic you are. And it comes to mind, there's this, I can't remember the name of the author, but I know there's this theory in Chile, Mapurbe, right? Or this idea of living or how you live your indigeneity, or how you live in mediation when not being in that place that you've been dislocated, and that language that you're dislocated, but at the same time you're living in this urban environment which is quite different and have hybrid elements that you're still sort of navigate towards, but you don't want to lose that other part of you and you're trying to fight against it, right? So I find it interesting that it seems that quite performatic, that we have to navigate these, and in which moment you're more Mapuche, and in which moment you're more Latino, right? So I don't know if y'all could give us ideas or want to talk about this idea of being authentic, or how authentic you are when you're being questioned, and there is a preconception through that question that you're already different.
Pues yo siento que a mí me ha pasado bastante, no sé, cuando estuve en Chile, el ser confundida por chilenos que pensaban que era haitiana, ¿no? Como la imagen de lo afrodescendiente, lo negro en Chile era directamente haitiano. Y entonces al ser haitiano ya tenía como una forma, una estructura, un pensamiento sobre ese sujeto que era señalado como haitiano. Entonces también como se normaliza o se esencializa, ¿no? El ser una persona que viene de un territorio con población afrodescendiente y llega a Chile, ¿no? Como se asume entonces que hay unas razones por las que estás allí y hay unos procesos migratorios que te llevaron a estar allí. E inmediatamente pues son conscientes de que no eres haitiano, que hablas español y que estás entendiendo el tono, la intención, el propósito señalador que tiene esa pregunta de la nacionalidad, pues entonces la relación frente a ti cambia, ¿no? Entonces, creo que es todo el rato hablando las nociones de la raza, pues como el pensamiento de la raza en esas preguntas, en esos señalamientos, quiénes son las personas que están admitidas de migrar, de estar en otro país y de no ser cuestionadas constantemente por estar en ese territorio. Pero, por ejemplo, en Colombia también, ¿no? Pues podemos hablar de, de cómo se construyen unos enclaves étnicos o más bien unos imaginarios étnicos que sitúan a lo afrodescendiente o a lo étnico en ciertos territorios nada más, ¿no? Y cuando no haces parte de esos territorios, pero estás habitando en las principales ciudades del país, entonces ya hay una cantidad de preguntas frente a eso, ¿no? Y eso ha sido pues como algo que he tomado como un proceso de investigación para mis trabajos, ¿no? Como permitir mi experiencia como mujer afrodescendiente para teorizar, ¿no? Y cuestionar el pensamiento colonial hegemónico de la academia que anula cualquier subjetividad en esos procesos de investigación, ¿no? Y más bien permitir la subjetividad de habitar este cuerpo en este territorio con ciertas experiencias sociales históricas que se viven en el país para yo tener la agencia de hablar sobre mi experiencia y de las personas con las que vivo, ¿no? Y cómo me ha tocado atravesar la historia y sus procesos de invisibilización, blanqueamiento, negación. Entonces, sí, como ser consciente de esas realidades vas construidas en las nociones de raza para colocarlo sobre la mesa y conversar desde los lenguajes plásticos sobre ello. Creo que es mucha información para Arturo interpretar, perdón.
Yeah, I feel that happened to me in Chile. I got confused a lot with Haitian, with being Haitian. Chilean people thought I was Haitian, and it's only because of they have a certain Chilean people tend to have a certain image of what African people with African descent are or where they're from. So I was asked, "Are you Haitian in Chile?" And Haitian, there's a certain relation to the Haitian people. There's a certain structure and form that goes with being Haitian. So Haitian subjects are sort of normalized, essentialized, and yeah, I'm trying to remember. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think you
but
can see it. You go.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I got asked if I was Haitian, and that's, I think, part of, yeah, that was part of my process in Chile. So there was a sort of a certain intention, a certain tone regarding that question about my nationality. And that intention, that tone had to do with the topic of race, of course, the signaling of a certain race, who are in a signaling or a question of race in relation to who are allowed to inhabit a certain territory. Then back in Colombia, there's also a certain imaginary regarding ethnicity. There are certain territories that where there's more people with African descent. So if you're not there in that territory, if you're in the main urban areas, in the main cities, then again, there are some questions about why you're there. So that's been part of my process, and I've been researching that in my own work. As an woman with African descent, it's important for me to theorize about that, to question the colonial thought about it, about and how the academy has also sort of tried to answer that for us. And I've tried to gain some agency about my own history, my own people, and the whitening process, the process of trying to erase Black people. Yeah.
No, that's really beautiful, and I think it's important to mention, right? Like the idea of the stratification of that class and race, right? It's by asking if you're Haitian, it's kind of implying that somehow you're in a lower condition than maybe a Black person from Dominican Republic, from Puerto Rico, from Jamaica. So it's kind of like just playing out with this colonial idea of caste, right? And positioning people in this kind of value system. And depending on that value system, as you mentioned, the tone, right? The tone in which they speak to you, how they address you, and how they believe they have agency over your body because you're that person. And as you say, it's interesting because you know the tone and you could play with the tone and you could kind of like shift it and move it around to get some agency and empower yourself by naming yourself the way you want to be named, or identify yourself by the way you want to identify yourself. Paula?
Yeah, for me, the concept of authenticity or original is very close, I think, because yeah, in the Mapuche context, it's also super hard to find the pure Mapuche, the essence, the essential identity, or because I think this all this needs to find the pureness comes from the idea of from the colonialism, actually, the or colonial wound in us. So we are trying to look to the past and find some elements which can help us to find ourselves in this present. But the problem is our territories are different, or territories also were colonized. So what is our situation and our context now? We are, of course, very how you say, like, we are very tocados for the Occidental culture. So we are super mixed in a way. So for me, some questions, for example, are where is my Mapuche-ness start and my Chileanism ends? I don't know. I am Chilean. I am Mapuche. I am. What is my borderlines in my own body? For example, is my skin a trace of my history, of my heritage? Is my surname? Is my number of the institution CONADI? CONADI is an institution in Chile from the state, which is in charge of the registration of different kind of indigenous people. So what is your document which show to the world what or who are you? So I find super interesting this question about authenticity and original identity. I think, in my opinion, that not exist. The essential thing, the pureness. I'm that kind of complete something is for me is a kind of alarm. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable with that kind of idea of pureness or essential things. And now in the context of, for example, Switzerland, here as a migrant person, the situation of legal situation, for example, is another kind of authenticity, or people because some people are asking to you every time how you can stay here, for example, what you did. You are studying here in a university, you're married, what are you are illegal here, what that is another kind of authenticity which people is permanent asking to you. And yeah, it's super weird to try all the time trying to show the people who are you and what is the way that you are here and you can stay here, and you have to show your I don't know, document, not literally, but in a way to explain to people what is your situation, legal situation, for example. So yeah, in this last year, I has learned a bit about this kind of questions. Sometimes I really try to avoid it because it's weird, like because, for example, in my case, as a Mapuche person in Chile, just when you say I am Mapuche, for example, it's a kind of political statement. But here it's weird because people don't know what is Mapuche, what that means. It's like Mapuche, indigenous people, okay? So people say, you're Chilean. And in a way, it seems like Chilean now is a kind of political statement. It's a question for me because it's like, it's not easy to say I am Chilean because it's weird. It's not comfortable to me. But yeah, in this context, you have to reconnect your own identity or re-recognize to you who you are. Yeah, it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're kind of reassuring yourself that you are who you say you are somehow, or you're playing the part well, or you're performing well, right? And that's come to this idea that you're constantly performing identity, right? Even though you mentioned the idea of being original. So if there's no such thing as original, then comes the issue of self-identification. I think that for me, or at least I define myself, as you say, right? Being Mapuche in Chile is a political action. For me, calling myself negro in Costa Rica or black and not using Afro-descendant and Afro whatever is a political action also, because I'm still a black person navigating Costa Rica. Beyond all these laws or government establishments, I'm still a black person navigating the everyday in Costa Rica, and I still have to deal with the same racial issues, right? The same ones that my family deal with back in the 80s, I'm dealing with the same ones now, right? So it's easier for me to define myself as a black person, and I feel comfortable when I navigate the street and people, oh, negro, right? Because I understand the code, and as Astrid mentioned earlier, right? You understand the tone in which they're saying it, and you have an agency to fight against that just by yeah, negro como el culo de tu madre, right? And then it's like, oh, whoa, this guy he's answering, and then like, oh yeah, you try to call me this way, so it's like, let's play it off, and then they just completely shift their perspective on who they talking, and they know that, oh, this person, I have to be careful because he might have an opinion for himself and how he identify himself and represent himself. So I don't know. I think it's powerful in a way, right? But it's tricky, as you say, right? How we manage to not fall in this co-option, right? And using all of these Western or American terms of Afro-descendant, Afro-American, or queer, or I don't know. It's tricky because, or even the idea: are you define yourself as Latinos? Right? Are you Latinos, Astrid? Are you Latina? How you feel your Latinidad? in terms of living in Colombia and when you have to navigate it other places? It's like, are you feel Latina or what you define as Latina?
Pues aquí nunca hablamos de latino, la verdad. No, creo que es una construcción que se hace cuando estás o en Estados Unidos o en Europa o en otro continente que no sea Avia Yala, ¿no? Eh, no aquí hay otras clasificaciones, ¿no? Como hay otros rótulos que en donde y cuando se construye un imaginario de lo latino, no soy yo, no es mi pelo, no es mi piel, ¿no? Entonces, nunca he habitado ese escenario de lo latino, la verdad.
Paula?
Yeah, I've never considered myself Latina. Here that's a construction people use when you are in the USA or in Europe, not in Abya Yala. Here we find other classifications, other labels, and other imaginaries are constructed. But yeah, not me. It's not my skin. Yeah.
I have to quote a reel from Instagram that I watched a couple of days ago. There was a video of a woman from, I don't know what country, but from Latin America, and she said, for example, Chileans, people which is almost Latinos. And it was super funny because I think it's in a way real. Not too much time ago, I have the feeling in Chile people really don't see themselves as Latinos. The idea of Latinos, I think, is super, from the Western in a way. We don't have our own idea of Latinidad or Latinness. And in Chile, the context is super different. Also, there people don't used to use this word for describe Chilean people. It's not very common, but maybe in these last years, through the music, actually the urban music, I don't know, reggaeton and another kind of music, lyrics are more in relation with that kind of idea of Latinidad or people from Latin America, and maybe now is slowly introducing this concept. But for me, I found that word more strong now in the context of as a migrant person, because here is like an important thing. When you are you speak Spanish, for example, you are immediately like a Latino person or people from Latin America, or all even people from Spain. Sometimes people just put all these Spanish speakers in a in a bag, and it's all the same, and which is super weird for me. But yeah, I don't know. It's a complex word. I think it's a complex concept because it's full of for me full of stereotypes in a way, and sometimes some people from Latin America, for example, use that word to like as a word of resistance, like in a political way. But sometimes I think it's not like using like this. So I don't know. Yeah, it's strange for me.
No, I think I understand where you're going. Like for me, when you mention music, right? It just, the first thing that comes to mind is the idea of K-pop. Like my understanding is that K-pop is established like a national, let's say, mechanism to promote Korea, right? To promote the country, and I think it's quite powerful, right? So I wonder if there is some sort of conscience behind all this reggaeton and all this music that's going on there to promote Latinidad or Latino culture as something that can be marketed, right? Because at the end, that's the idea, how we market this. And as artists, I think it's tricky because yes, like, as you say, it's complex to define yourself as Latino, right? When you live in these areas, you don't think about that idea of Latino. And for me, sometimes it comes related to aspiration, right? The aspiration to the American dream, right? Because most of the time you become Latino when you find yourself, and I'm going to say this in a really bizarre way. Like I'm not sure who quoted this term, but it's like this idea of colorblind switcheroo, right? I think most of the people who use the term Latino in the American context are people who might pass as white in their countries in South and Central America. So when they get to the United States and they find themselves in the situation that, oh no, you're not white anymore, right? There's this colorism, and oh, you're not white, you're brown, right? So they need to define themselves as something because they thought that what they had back there was the same, and then they find themselves confronted that, oh no, I'm the other now. So now I need to define myself as Latino and maybe find some power within that idea that I'm Latino and Latinidad. And let's complicate it, right? Now we have the term Latinx. And how complicated is this idea to understand Latinx? Because I don't know, like my vague idea about it is beyond that is referred to gender, it also referred to location. And it might refer to people who migrated from some country in Central and South America to the United States and eventually became an immigrant. And as you say, the idea that they might get documents, but they don't have a relationship to their country. So they speaking about a country that they probably never been to or lost completely a connection, but they still feel part of it, right? And it's tricky because yes, they still part of it because they have roots, their family is still there, and their parents, maybe their first generation, they still have some sort of like legacy related to the country. But I find it tricky because let's put it in perspective that there is no such thing as a category of Latinx in collection or in major museums, right? So if you're defining yourself as Latinx, you might also find yourself in a situation in which you're not collectible yet because the term is not validated by the institution or is not validated by the centers of art or the biggest museums. So there's no interest per se in collecting Latinas because we don't know how to digest it. So my question now is that we're going to start having Latin American art and Latinx art and how they play with each other. I don't know. I find interesting the idea of defining or creating these definitions, but at the same time, we have to be careful because we might get ourselves in a situation in which we just making it complicated for us to even understand each other and just become to the reality that we're hybrid in a way and that the location of our body defines a lot of the way our identity is not only formed, but also performed, right? And at the end, it might be that identities are completely performative. So that might be a question that I throw out there that we probably just perform an identity and we just think of ourselves because we live in some sort of alternative reality of what we should be. I know.
Tengo dos comentarios para esto que comentas, Marta. El primero es cuando hablas del el privilegio, el lugar, la posición de privilegio que tienen las personas, aquí las llamamos blanco mestizas, ¿no? De hoy decidir ser una cosa y mañana decidir ser otra cosa. Pues, la gente negra no tenemos esos privilegios, ¿no? Como de poder cambiar hoy ser aceptada, no ser aceptada en este lugar y luego ser aceptado en este otro espacio jugando a ser otra persona, porque mi piel sigue siendo la misma, ¿no? La lectura que se tiene sobre mi cuerpo sigue siendo la misma. Entonces, claro, pues cuando se enuncia lo latino, por ejemplo, viniendo de un país de Colombia en otro territorio, pues es gente blanco mestiza en Colombia que toma elementos culturales de las poblaciones negras y las utiliza y las reviste y las reinterpreta desde sus lugares de poder y le borra toda la agencia política, social, histórico, cultural de estos elementos culturales de donde nacieron, ¿no? Como cuando pensamos en el reggaetón o cuando pensamos en el reggaetón que se está haciendo en Colombia desde las personas latinas leídas en Estados Unidos, pues uno encuentra muchos elementos de las comunidades negras en Colombia y no necesariamente están siendo nombradas o reconocidas desde estas personas que están cantando. Entonces, es una posición de privilegio. Y también en otra parte que es ¿no? El poder de atrincherarse, ¿no? Y de construir o de pensar desde el cimarronaje y cómo eh, todo el rato estamos buscando leer a personas negras, escuchar personas negras, ver producciones de personas negras, con el propósito de ir, pues primero dándole visibilidad a sus trabajos, pero también reconociendo la agencia histórica que tenemos, ¿no? Hace unos días veía una conversación de productores de eh, eh, afroficción o afrofuturismo, ¿no? Y ellos hablaban de que por qué ponerle el afro antes de la ficción o el afro antes del futurismo si todo el mundo que está haciendo ficción no necesariamente le ponen este prefijo, ¿no? Entonces unos decían que era desde una posición política y otros pues, cuestionaban ese prefijo. Pero entonces también se comentaba allí de la importancia de entender el tiempo de las producciones que toman, que el tiempo que toman las producciones de las personas negras, ¿no? Como tenemos que hacer un trabajo de contar que somos humanos, luego para llegar a hacer lo que queremos hacer en estos momentos, ¿no? Tenemos que construir toda una narrativa para visibilizar, para reconocer la humanidad de las personas negras, para luego hablar de ficción. Entonces, la gente que es nombrada o conocida como latina en otros territorios es gente blanco mestiza que se salta ese proceso y toma los resultados de estos proyectos que hemos hecho las personas negras durante mucho tiempo y la utilizan y no reconocen la agencia histórica de estas personas y los territorios o las comunidades negras. Eso.
So I have two comments regarding what you were talking about. There's this privileged positions, like we call them white mixed race people, and they have the privilege of choosing to be this or that, while Black people don't have this privilege because we can't change our skin. We can't be accepted here and not accepted there. We can't change our skin. Our skin remains the same. Our skin doesn't change color. So we find that we find that white mixed race people sometimes take these places and they take they take away the cultural political agency of some elements. For example, reggaeton in some cases in Colombia, it's created by this white mixed race people, but they're just using the product of that's been created by the Black population sometimes, but the Black population is not named. They're not recognized. These people who are singing reggaeton in some cases. The other case is, or the other topic is marooning. And yeah, that marooning. That marooning gives Black people visibility and the possibility of recognizing Black people's work. It gives them agency. A couple of days ago, I heard a conversation between producers of Afrofuturism, and they were asking why putting the prefix Afro to futurism? Why not just futurism? Because other people make futurism, for example, or fiction, and they don't add any prefix to it. But it's a political thing using this prefix. It takes time to produce these films, in the sense that we have to first tell the story that we are human, we're actually human, Black people are human, and then we can create a sort of narrative. We have to make ourselves visible first. We have to show our humanness first, and then we can go into fiction. So yeah, and sometimes while white mixed race people, they can go directly to produce or film fiction in this case, and they don't have to prove or show their humanness. They just go and utilize what Black populations have created over time, but not recognizing the agency of these Black peoples.
It's very important for me, at least in my process as a migrant, this idea of performative identity. And in this point, I can think in my grandparents when they must in the past to migrate from the countryside to these big cities, trying to find a better economic situations and better conditions of lives. And in all this process, there was a very important need to survive. And for survive in a context, in an urban context, as a Mapuche people, you have, in a way, to integrate to the society, so the social context, the new social context. And that is very, very complicated, I think, because in this process, at least in the case of Chile, in the beginnings of the 20th century, a lot of Mapuche people they stopped to speak Mapuzungun, the Mapuche language, and they stopped another traditional practices in the city. And of course, that is super painful, but also is a way to survive in this super hard context. And that is the interesting thing in this point, the plasticity, in a way, for of the identities to survive, and also to preserve some traditions at the same time. When you stopped you stop to share, for example, some traditions, some elements of the culture. Sometimes that way survey, so como que people use that for hide and protect some practices, and also to protect their sons and daughters of the discrimination in societies. And I think the question for me, at least in my new context, because I am always thinking a lot in this memory of my family. I am in a new diaspora, in a new process of migration. How much we will give to integrate us to this new social context. And for me, that is the point of tension, because you are in resistance, you have to survive, but also you have to learn some elements of this new culture. So yeah, for me, super. Maybe it's not too violent, but for me, super violent. There are some course with the name integration. Like you can go and learn German, and also you can learn behavior and other tips of the Swiss life, for example, in this case. And yeah, you can use that for survive, for to develop yourself better in this context. But also, yeah, what is the point? You can also use this plasticity to play the game, but at the same time you can preserve your own identity, your own communities for when you can where you can share and to have a safe space, for example. And yeah, I think this idea of performative identity allowed this kind of process and this kind of experience that are not easy, but in a way are super useful to be yourself and to be in resistance in a way. I don't know if I explained very well. Sorry.
No, and it makes perfect sense to me. I think the idea for me is it comes to this position in which I refuse to assimilate, right? For me, assimilate means that someone is giving away something, someone is giving a part of them, right? So what part of me I'm giving away to be able to be part of you? And that's the scary part, as you say. How much of myself and how much of my values I have to give up to be able to cater to your taste and be part of your society or part of your community and group. And I think that that's come to my other, I'm not sure if question or subject that comes out when you both were talking about this, right? And is this idea, how much of your work have to do some sort of pedagogy, right? How much it involves in teaching people, as you say, right, Astrid, that yeah, first you have to let them know that you're alive, that you're human, right? Because yes, I completely understand what you mean. Like indigenous and Black people had we've been through a process in which our bodies has been not only criminalized but also treated as roaches, right? We've been treated so badly and so low that when you start talking about person as roaches or as animals, you're able to be violent or create violence over these bodies without any kind of responsibility because they're just animals, right? Or they're just insects. So you're dehumanize them, and yeah, there is this fight to validate yourself as human, and then come the process of let's tell them why I'm human, and let's teach them how these processes work. So I'm not sure if you all could talk about these ideas, right? Like how much of this teaching is part of your methodology when it comes to produce your work, right? Are you consciously thinking about these processes? Are you consciously know that, okay, now I have to talk about this? Because we spoke earlier today, and I mentioned, Astrid, we spoke earlier, and I mentioned how I find your work to be so involved into anthropologies, kind of like studies and sociology studies, and you go deep into history, and then you bring it back into context to give us your perspective, right? And as you were saying, like how values your perspective not only because you're Black, but because you're doing the research from another gaze, right? From another point of view, and you're presenting that point of view not only as a fiction, but also as an instrument, and also as a tool for us to engage in these communities.
Vaya pregunta, Marton. Pues yo soy súper amiga de las exposiciones en donde se generan conversaciones frente a lo que está allí montado, ¿no? No me gusta pensar la idea de hacer una exhibición sin espacios de conversación. Porque creo que tenemos una profesión, una carrera demasiado relevante, ¿no? Y es cuestionar las imágenes que se han construido históricamente y que han construido personas en posiciones de poder para representar y narrar lo que es falso, lo que es verdadero, lo que es admitido en una academia, lo que no es admitido en una academia como conocimiento, quiénes son los portadores de conocimiento y quiénes son los informantes. Entonces, tenemos en el cuerpo, en las manos, ¿cierto? En nuestra decisión de vida, una responsabilidad de cuestionar esas imágenes, ¿no? Y crear nuevas narrativas o visibilizar las narrativas que están ocurriendo en espacios no hegemónicos, donde ya se viene trabajando esto hace mucho tiempo, ¿no? Pues tengo 28 años y yo no he creado nada, o sea, vengo continuando el proceso que muchos artistas en Colombia y a nivel global, artistas negros vienen haciendo, ¿no? Que es proponer una nueva historia del arte, en donde se posicionen otras representaciones, otras miradas, otras voces, otras historias y memorias. Entonces, creo que los espacios pedagógicos en las exposiciones permite cuestionar también eso, como cuál es la colección de arte que hay en los espacios expositivos. Y esa colección habla un poco de cuál es el pensamiento que tiene esa institución que está construyendo la noción de belleza, de estética en el territorio. Entonces, eso, pienso que siempre pienso mi trabajo como la posibilidad de generar una conversación al revisar los elementos de la historia para poner esa historia sobre la mesa en el presente y pensar cómo se puede revisitar esa historia desde otros lugares, ¿no? Siempre leo un texto que se llama Venus en dos actos de Saidiya Harman. Ella allí en este texto está haciendo preguntas a la lectora, al lector todo el rato, ¿no? Como cuáles son los peligros que tiene el mirar a la cara, abrir el ataúd y mirar a la cara de esa muerte y revivir nuevamente esas violencias, pero a través de otros lenguajes, ¿no? Entonces, cómo revisitar la historia de la gente negra, por ejemplo, en el país y sin volver a narrar esas estereotipaciones a violencia, sino construir nuevas narrativas dignificantes. Entonces creo que los espacios pedagógicos o los espacios de conversación permite que eso no se quede solamente en una lectura de una persona que va a la exposición, sino de realmente construir una narración, ¿no? Eso.
Well, that's a big question, Martin. I'm a big fan of exhibitions where we can talk and we can have conversations. I don't like exhibitions without a space to talk because we have a profession that's very important. We are we're questioning the imaginaries that have been historically constructed by people with power to represent and to narrate what's false, what's true, what's allowed into the academic space, what's not allowed into the academic space. Who are the informants? Who are the knowledge carriers? So in our hands, in our bodies, we have big responsibilities of creating new images, new narratives, to make to giving visibility in hegemonic spaces, especially. I'm only 28 years old, so I haven't created anything. I am only a continuation of a big work that's been previously done by other artists, Black artists. It's a new history of art, a new representation, new voices, new memories. And so we have to have a position in these educational spaces, in exhibitions. We have to create conversation. And these institutions, some institutions have created thought, they've determined what's beautiful, what's not beautiful in the territories. So our work is I can see our work as a possibility to talk about this, to examine the history, to bring the history to the present, to revisit other places. I'm a big fan of this book called Venus in Two Acts. And it talks about the danger of opening the coffin, so to speak, and to look at the death and reinterpret it, to go back to those old violences and to revisit them, but in a new way, to go back to look back and look at the Black history and to find some dignity in it through conversation. And I think conversation allows us to do that.
Yeah, for me, the topic of pedagogy is very strong as well, because yeah, my first studies was pedagogy in contemporary dance. So teaching from the body to another bodies, and to understand our histories or memories, traumas, and a lot of things which are inside the bodies, and trying to guide in a way as a teacher is a big thing, and it's a big responsibility, as Astrid said. And yeah, when I think in my case, when I have a space to show something and to show some message or some topic which maybe would be tricky or not very easy to understand, I think it's very important how you approach people and the audience to understand in a way your work. I really don't like this kind of art, which is super complicated to understand or super abstract or conceptual. I think, of course, in contemporary art, there are some elements that we use in an aesthetic way, maybe. But for me, in my work, I work a lot with performance, with my own body. So my body is showing things. I think that is very interesting because people can identify themselves with this body. Or not, but it's a body. And I think it's the first thing with that you can directly you can feel affected or touched in a way. And yeah, and Astrid said something about representation or self-representation. I think is also a very, very good theme, because in the Mapuche context, for example, indigenous people, the representation of our bodies has been always from the Western and colonial gaze. So when you, as a indigenous person, for example, you make art and you are sharing your art and you share with another artist, an indigenous artist, for example, is very strong, because we are creating our own images, our own history, our own memories. And that is the reason, for example, why for me it's very important as well, the video, this format is, I know not all the world have access to the internet and I don't know, the cell phones and that kind of stuff, technology, but a lot of things have access. So for example, through video performance, you can have access to watch a piece of art for free. For example, you don't have to go to the museum or to a gallery, because sometimes really you don't have that access. It's too far from your house, or you don't know. Some exhibitions are open, etc. So yeah, I think the formats of the pieces of art are important and relevant in the moment when you want to share a message or tell a story through the artistic practices.
I think you brought up an interesting point, which is technology, right? Like I keep thinking about technology as the body, as the first technology, and how that body is a container of not only the knowledge of our ancestors, but also the violence, right? And how that knowledge and that violence is what informs somehow our work. And as Astrid mentioned, right, you have to knowledge those artists that were before you, because those artists are the ones that somehow give you agency to understand your position in this time. And I like to think about it in terms of, let's say, Caribbean spirituality, in terms of Yoruba and the idea of Ori, right? This idea that the Ori is located on the back of your head, and is the one that carry out the information of how you be reserveful, right? And I think that's part of the methodology that somehow, sorry, Astrid, I think somehow you carry in your practice by just acknowledging those people that were before you and understanding how they produce and how they could see the body, right? And how that body inform your work, and it informing not from a perspective that you're trying to recreate that violence, but you try to reconcile with that violence for you and not for other people to reconcile with it, because you're not trying to create a word that is complicit to other people to think that they're off it because you did it, right? This is almost like, I don't know, I find it like almost like a ritual for oneself to navigate again this idea of identity and how you navigate the work after you understand yourself, and you can carry out and have agency in what you're saying and what you're producing, and not be afraid to put it out there, because you understand the system in which it's established, and you understand the system in which you trying to engage that knowledge to a community, right? Because that's another question comes here, right? How you create community for yourself when you're not allowed to occupy these spaces, right? Because the idea that to be a good artist, that you have to be in a good museum, you know, you have to be at MoMA, you have to be at the Guggenheim, you have to have a collector. So how do we occupy those spaces when we are just not allowed, or we're just new in the scene, or we're just something exotic that they don't know how to deal or digest?
Mm. Yo vivo en ansiedad, precisamente por no, por estar sintiendo constantemente que no hago parte de esos códigos, de estos espacios que acabas tú de nombrar, ¿no? Em, pero para responder la primera pregunta, yo decidí cuando estaba estudiando en la universidad construir mi propio plan académico, ¿no? Fueron 4 semestres de historia del arte, en donde toda la historia del arte fue historia del arte europeo. Entonces, desde ese momento a mí me están estableciendo un, una declaración de cuál es el arte que me van a enseñar dentro de la institución y cuál es ese arte al que debo aspirar o esa producción a la que debo aspirar para ser admitida dentro de los sistemas del arte según la academia. Em, y al no encontrar ninguna referencia dictada por los profesores o por el pensum académico con el que yo me sintiera cercana, pues empecé a buscar mis propias referencias. Y es allí cuando me acerco a buscar cuáles son los artistas negros en Colombia y cuáles son sus trabajos y cuáles son las referencias de estos artistas negros en Colombia, ¿no? Para ir entendiendo que no solamente soy yo la que está sintiendo una ausencia de esa representación o de esos referentes dentro de la academia, sino que ellos que estudiaron arte hace muchos años más que yo, también lo vivieron y están haciendo arte con un enfoque negro o afro en el país y quiero saber cómo lo lograron. Entonces, allí me acerco a estos artistas, empiezo a revisar sus trabajos. Eh, y al revisar sus trabajos, entonces también empiezo a cuestionar lo que estaba leyendo, ¿no? La teoría de arte que me estaba entregando en la universidad, pues es una teoría de arte europeo, o si hay algo de latinoamericano, es indigenista, mirada desde un lugar completamente ajeno. Entonces ahí empiezo a leer a pensadores, escritores, escritoras afrodescendientes negros y a interesarme por esas reflexiones que ellos estaban haciendo desde sus propias experiencias. Em, entonces, al comprender pues como cuál es la historia del arte universal que se enseña en las instituciones, pero también la que se concibe dentro de los espacios expositivos o de exhibición, comercio del arte en Colombia, pues empiezo a entender también cuál es mi lugar dentro de esos espacios y cuál es el valor simbólico que tengo yo cuando me invitan a estos espacios y participar, ¿no? Y que tengo que usar mucho palo santo antes de entrar a estos espacios porque salgo completamente agotada y entiendo cuál es la lectura, la necesidad que ellos tienen conmigo y con mi trabajo dentro de estos espacios y que eh, cumplo eh, con un papel fundamental para ellos que es el poder hablar de la inclusión social o de la responsabilidad social, pero no necesariamente sus estructuras. Las estructuras de estas instituciones están cambiando, ¿no? Entonces, es como al entender el proceso histórico que han tenido las artistas y los artistas en Colombia, negros, también entiendo por qué está siendo, en cierto sentido, más rápido para mí estar dentro de estos espacios que a ellos les costó. Y también leía hace poco un texto en donde hablaban de la facilidad que hay, facilidad entre comillas, ¿no? De lo de colonial, del vender lo de colonial dentro de los espacios institucionales actualmente, porque repite esa lógica de lo negro como vendible, ¿no? Del cuerpo negro que se puede vender, que se comercializa. Entonces los productos de las personas negras también se venden y se comercializan, pero no necesariamente el sistema está cambiando o se está volviendo a favor de nosotros, sino que sigue siendo otra forma contemporánea, actualizada, una nueva tecnología de seguir comerciando con nuestros cuerpos.
I constantly live in anxiety. I have a feeling of not being part of these codes, these spaces, feeling that I'm not part of that. And regarding your first question, when I was in college, I had to create my own academic plan because there was 4 semesters dedicated to art, and it was mostly European art. So I understood that that was a statement that they were telling me what was art and what was not art, and what was allowed into the academy and what was not allowed into academy. And there was no reference for me. There was no point of reference. So I had to make my own reference. I had to look for Black artists in Colombia, and I started looking for these Black artists, and I realized that it was just not me that was sensing this absence of representation in the academy. That these artists were making art with a Black focus, and I started looking at their work, examining their work, and I started also questioning the theory I was studying in college, which was mostly European, or it was indigenous, but it was in looking at indigenous people from a foreign place, from outside. So I had to create my own experience of art. So so I had to realize, I had to understand what my place was in the commerce of art. I had to also understand what my symbolic place was, with the role I was playing when I was invited to these places, these exhibitions. I had to light some Palo Santo because I had to recover from this energy drain. I was drained, and they were reading me. They were reading me in a certain way. Inside these places, I was playing a role. I had to. They could speak about social inclusion, social responsibility, but the institution was not really changing. The structure of the institution was not changing. So this is part of a historical process, and I can see now that my ingress in the art world has been faster than before. And there's a sort of the people speak now that there's a sort of easiness to sort of sell the decolonial art to institutions now, because Black people, or what Black people produce, is sort of sellable. It can be sold, it can be commercialized. So Black people's products can be sold. But the system is not changed. We keep the same structure. We keep the same system. Black bodies are being treated the same way as before, even though I was admitted, so to speak, faster into the art world.
Yeah, the question about museums and indigenous and Afro artists is very complex, because I have always this questioned about this heritage of human souls, you say soul, and human soul. Yes, and I think we cannot forget the fact that in Europe this kind of human souls had a place in not too much time ago, actually, and in fact now we are coexisting at the same time with museums which have a lot of items of, from traditional and elements of indigenous cultures, and at the same time we are trying to make contemporary art. For me, that is super, like the layers of the time, because it seems like we are in the super past, like something like this kind of yeah, spiritual and super relevant items in museums in Europe, for example. And at the same time, in another museum, you have an indigenous exhibition, and it's super respectful about the identities and blah blah blah. So how we can connect with these two super different realities at the same time, for me, it's a big question, and it's not easy to answer. I don't have an answer, actually, but I am still doing my artistic work here, for example, in Europe, in some institutional spaces and super white places, but at the same time, I has been invited, for example, with a lot of Latin American artists, which is a super and very important and huge opportunity to share with these people who are super interesting and super. They are an example of resistance and through the artistic practice, in this case. So you can having a very good experience, but at the same time to be in a contradiction, in a permanent contradiction. So yeah, I think we have the right to be in these spaces, because it's the minimum. They have to give us something, at least a space. And the question is, how can we use these spaces, these conflict and tensional spaces and institutions? And yeah, I think a good idea is, as Astrid said, questioning the structures of these kind of institutions. And I have an example. Last year, me and three more artists, as well Daniel Artis, we were in an exhibition in Cologne, in Germany, and it was in the Museum Ludwig, and it's a huge museum with a huge collection of art, and it was difficult to deal with that. How can we create a new work is talking about decolonialism inside of this institution? So yeah, in my case, I create something using the history of the owners, the old owners of this museum, these collections, this collection in the Ludwig Museum, from the Ludwig family, and they create their fortune from the chocolate industry in Africa. So I worked with that topic, for example, and I think you can question in a way these structures. Is not, of course, you cannot destroy it, but in a way you put in the table the point of the contradiction. This museum is trying to invite us to speak about decolonialism, but at the same time, this museum have this history. So yeah, it's not easy, but I I think is a big question for BIPOC artists.
Navigating, learning to navigate it. And you bring up, again, like a lot of subject that can be related. The idea of I don't know, I'm gonna talk about my personal experience with my work. I find useful to appropriate colonial methodologies, right? Because we're still living within colonial methodologies. We think that they're not, but they're still there. As Astrid mentioned, we're living in the same structure, just camouflage as something else, or pass offs that's like something else. And I find valid to use these methodologies and appropriate them and try to learn about them, right? And when you learn about them, you could use them in your favor. Like you mentioned the idea of human zoo. I find an analogy in terms of human zoo. And of course, we all know Sarah Barton, right? The Black woman that was exhibited all over the world because of her big, let's put it this way, ass, right? And how there is this interest and this exotic aspect of that. And yeah, we talk about it in terms of ethnographic, but we have to be real. This is ethnopornographic, right? There was an intention behind the exhibition of these bodies, and that the intention was that we like these bodies. There is a refusal to inhabit these bodies or to have them closer to us, but there is this interest and this consumption of these bodies and appropriation of the bodies, right? And then, as I don't define myself as a gay person, because I find problematic the structure in which gay is built. It's built within a structure of whiteness and hierarchy and power. And this same idea of the human soul is happening within the gay communities, right? You're establishing a connection with someone who you believe there is a trust connection. And I could put even this idea of BDSM, right? Or bondage being not about pain, but about trust, right? And establishing a connection through trust, and how that connection through trust sometimes is still embedded in the idea of hierarchy, who have the power, right? As a Black person, I know I can't compete within the structure of whiteness in the gay community, right? Because I don't have access to that money. I don't have some sort of like family, how you say, herencia familiar, right? That I could use to build my own. And if I get married, I would have to be married within this. So it's complex, right? I would be forced into a structure in which I'm still the same person, and I'm still being used in a way and people getting profit out of me somehow. So yeah, so we're still living within those structures, and it's for me, it's always good to try to establish a connection, as Astrid said, the past, right? What we learn from those artists that we're working those subjects, and how intersect my body and how I can present those subjects in a way that open a conversation. And yeah, and it's sad, but we're still living within those systems in which there is an appropriation of bodies, right? And this is the Black and brown and Aboriginal bodies. It's quite probable at this time. So we still have like, well, it's 8:30. I'm not sure, Brent, we have questions in the chat, and I will leave it to Astrid and Paula how much you want to extend. We still have half an hour. We could just start kind of like closing the conversation. If y'all have some comments you want to add, or suggestions, or advice. I hate advice. I hate the word advice because it's kind of like very prescriptive. So let's talk about, you know, what I hate also being considered like the voice of Blackness in Costa Rica, or the artist. You know, I like to think more, how can we open up space for our communities, or how you work in that idea of opening space for your communities in the place that you're located, or back at home if you're not at home right now. How you manage to keep those connections, how you manage to talk about this issue. Like for me, I enjoy talking with Astrid because it feels so close, in the sense that I don't have that proximity with other Costa Rican artists. because there's this idea there's no other Black artists producing the type of work I'm doing in Costa Rica, which I think is a lie, right? Because the only reason I'm out there is because somehow I have the agency to put myself out there and fight to get this agency in this position. And I don't know, sometimes I feel kind of like bad because I know there gotta be other people with some rad or better work that I'm doing, but they haven't found a way to get to the place that I might be, or the position or the agency I might have at this time. So how can we open up, right? This kind of environment in which we populate the scene, and it's like it's not weird anymore. It's just a norm that, oh yeah, there's 1,000 Black artists in Colombia. You know what I mean?
Paula, no sé si tú quieres responder primero la pregunta. No lo sé, Marton, porque la verdad estoy en un momento en el que estoy en un proceso de entenderme como parte de una colectividad. He estado en colectivos durante muchos años, en organizaciones durante muchos años, y hace varios años he decidido darme el espacio para saberme, sentirme, pensar. Entonces, pero pues también este tiempo me ha permitido entender con quiénes son esas personas con las que me gustaría trabajar, o el tipo de espacios en los que me gustaría estar, y el tipo de relaciones que quiero establecer a partir de trabajar con otros artistas, con otras artistas. Entonces, por eso decía que si Paula quería responder la pregunta, porque estoy en eso, pero he encontrado a través de Instagram conversaciones, ¿cierto? Por internet, a artistas con los que también tengo mucha resonancia, con mucha vibración, pero estamos cada quien en su país, muy lejos, y que posiblemente una exposición nos junte en un mismo país y podamos conversar y hacer algo, pero sé que están ahí preguntándose posiblemente lo mismo que yo me estoy preguntando desde otra posición, con otras experiencias en el cuerpo para responder o argumentar esas preguntas, y en eso estoy.
I don't know. In a moment, I'm trying to understand myself. I'm as being part of a collective. I've always been part of organizations, and at the time I'm giving myself some time to just feel who I am, think about who I am, know myself. I'm giving myself time to understand the spaces I'd like to be part of, the relationships I'd like to create with people I'd like to work with. I'm right now in the middle of it, so that's why I was telling Paula to start. I've found people on Instagram, artists on Instagram. I've had conversations with them, and they're artists in different countries, and we might get together in some exhibition. But yeah, I've been having conversations with people from different places, but I'm right now in the middle of my trying to understand and discovering myself.
Yeah, about communities and collective work. I am in a process to as well understand this idealization that exists in English, idealization of the concept of community, because for me, communities not necessarily are perfect, not necessarily people is very nice with you all the time, and we have now this idea of every people in a community are happy and super support another, but that is not very realistic. And for example, in the Mapuche context, in some communities, sometimes not all the people are like is in a good way all the time, because of course you have problems, you have different kind of problems, and that is a community at the same time. So I don't have too much this idea of community like of as a ideal or idealistic idea. And neither about the collective work. I am part of a collective, a Mapuche collective with the name Rañin Toleufu. But I think the most important thing that what unified to us is the affections. And I think that is super interesting, and that is the reason why we have already 6 or 7 6 years. And I think that is very special for me, because we are in different places. We are all Mapuche, but also we are in different cities and in my case countries. And but in Switzerland, in this city in Zurich, I found a very nice community of Latin American artists, and we are not working together, but mostly we had some parties, or we just meet each other to cook something at dinner or something like that. And sometimes collective is not necessarily to work. Sometimes I have a collective just for work or projects or different things, and I think it's cool. But also you can have a collective or a community just for enjoy and just for love and just for rest in your community. I don't know, maybe I am not answering your question, but I took this concept of community and collective. I don't know, but maybe it's just the idea to think in a group which is supporting you. Sometimes is very important. It's very important for life and for care, but also don't idealize. It's good to keep not too high expectations.
I think there is a beauty in conflict, right? And whenever you take part of communities or collaborative actions, there is a risk of encountering those conflicts. And I think it's valid to just engage them and work towards them, or work around them, or work with them as a tool. Because yes, as you say, sometimes we just idealize the idea that because we're all together, we're doing something good for the community, right? And maybe not. Maybe the way that we're thinking together is more damaging the community, because we're just replicating some sort of system or ideas that we're seeing some other places. So yeah, so I think it's important to keep in mind the idea of care, right? The affection and the connection within those care and affection. I think it's more valid that way. And I like to think in terms of collective as in an organic way. I collaborate a lot. I have never been like officially in like a specific collective or organization, but I kind of like to just organically start working with someone and see where it goes, right? And for me, that's kind of the way to engage it is more in an organic matter and not forcing the engagement and see where it goes. And now we got like 20 minutes. There is no question in the chat. So maybe we could start closing. And I don't know if you all wanna have a final remarks or maybe announcements or something you want to share before we sign off. And yeah, Paula, Astrid, any remarks?
Yo solo decir que estoy triste y feliz al mismo tiempo porque ya se acabó el fellowship y fue muy, muy bueno estar todos los martes conversando con ustedes, conociéndoles sus trabajos y escuchando de sus procesos y de sus vidas. Pues, el dinero también ayuda mucho, así que también muy feliz por esa parte. Agradecerle a Seba por permitirme conocerles a ustedes. Y también pues estoy pensando, ¿no? en la posibilidad de tener a personas en Canadá, en Nueva York, en Suiza, en varios lugares para visitar. Entonces, muchas ganancias por todas partes. Y bueno, gracias Arturo por la interpretación y a Marton y a Paula por la conversación, por compartir palabra.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm really happy and sad at the same time because the fellowship is over. I'm gonna miss meeting you guys on Tuesdays and getting to these meetings were really good. Meeting you was really good and getting to know about your lives and hearing about your processes, your work. The money really helped, of course, and I also really want to thank Seva for giving me this opportunity to be here. And I also know that I have many places to visit and to contact, and Canada, for example. Yeah, and I want to thank Arturo for the interpretation and Paula and Martin for this talk today.
El sentimiento es mutuo. You're more than welcome to visit in Toronto, or we could come up with something so y'all could visit. And I just want to thank Arturo. Thank you so much, Gloria, and also Alisa. Thank you for being with us. Paula, Astrid, un placer. No será la última vez que conversemos. I'm pretty sure that we're going to have an opportunity to engage in some other way. And Brent, I don't know if you want to give us some announcement for tomorrow. We still have a week of, well, not a week, 2 days more of activities and talks, right? Yay. A pleasure.
I just want to say to thank you so much for this super interesting process from since last year, I think. And also I want to say thank you to Seva for invite me and give this space, and also to Brent, who is in the installation there. Please go to visit us or exhibition. And to Arturo, who is my friend, and also he was helping me with the translation by WhatsApp every meeting. And yeah, thank you, Astrid and Marton, for this conversation today, and Gloria and Alisa, and also to say thank you to Kemi, and she's not here, but also, yeah, it's a lot of things to say thank you, but it was a very, very nice process, and I will miss you a lot, all you guys.
Muchas gracias. Hasta luego, saludos, buenas noches.